death of the black teenager Stephen Lawrence had to be halted for several hours today in the inquiry chamber for the first time with the 5 white youths who are suspected of being involved in his death. One of them had just gone into the witness box when about 20 members of a black activist group overpowered police and forced their way into the room. In scuffles at the entrance to the building, police used CS gas spray to try to keep order. 4 people were treated in hospital, 2 were arrested.
Impassive to the jeers and shouts of abuse, the 5 men suspected by the Lawrence family of killing their son filed into the public chamber, summonsed to give an account of themselves. The 5 who weren't given police protection were accompanied by friends and family and given a hostile reception. A contemptuous kiss for the angry crowd from Jamie Acourt, the first to take the witness stand. He was followed by Luke Knight, the youngest of the men, who, along with Neil Acourt and Gary Dobson, can no longer face criminal proceedings. David Norris brought up the rear. But angry scenes in the lobby area brought an abrupt stop to proceedings. Scuffles broke out between police and members of the black Muslim radical group, the Nation of Islam. CS spray was then used at the entrance after, according to police, 2 officers were pushed to the floor and kicked. 4 people needed hospital treatment and 2 were arrested. This is the scenario that everyone feared. Emotions running out of control down here, and the evidence of the 5 suspects temporarily derailed. After the scuffle, members of the Nation of Islam stormed into the inquiry chamber. Jamie Acourt, then in the witness box, was bundled out of the chamber by officials and police as one man attempted to lunge at him. Members of the Nation of Islam denounced the inquiry as a sham, saying people were prevented from coming in.
We were stopped by police who felt intimidated by seeing members of the Nation of Islam walking together. And on seeing us coming in and rejecting us coming in, they drew their truncheons and they sprayed members of the Nation of Islam with CS gas.
The large crowd who couldn't get in to follow proceedings was subsequently given a video link in a nearby room. Mr. and Mrs. Lawrence appealed to them for calm.
We have stopped our breath for 5 years because we didn't really know what happened to our son. If we give these people the opportunity not to answer some of the questions, it may be we won't never know what happened to our son.
This afternoon, Neil Acourt, the second man to give evidence, said he only started carrying knives in self-defense after receiving death threats when he was implicated in Stephen Lawrence's murder. He told Edmund Lawson, the inquiry's barrister, that he was more likely to carry them in a black area than in a white one because he felt so at risk. The inquiry has already been shown this footage from a police surveillance operation, showing 4 of the 5 men with knives and using viciously racist language. Neil Acourt said the knives were being used out of boredom and that the language was them joking. The 5 men left under a hail of insults, abuse and aggression. Jamie Acourt made it clear the hatred was mutual. The mood turned ugly as bottles were thrown while the 5 were bundled into their vehicle. 3 return tomorrow. The Lawrences hope events outside the inquiry won't overshadow their evidence again. Rita Chakrabarti, BBC News, South London.
The hopes that Northern Ireland might be entering a new period of stability are facing their sharpest challenge. Protestant members of the Orange Order in Portadown say they will ignore a ruling from the Independent Parades Commission that they should not parade through a Catholic area of the town next Sunday. This evening, police were attacked on a Catholic estate in the nearby town of Lurgan after a search during which they found several pounds of explosives.
This was described as sporadic rioting by the RUC. It happened after a police search for arms in a nationalist estate in Lurgan. 9 improvised bombs containing the powerful explosive Semtex and nails were found. A police statement said the seizure raised questions about the intentions of some people in the present climate. Lurgan is just 6 miles from Drumcree. That can be the only climate the police have in mind. Orange Order leaders met in Belfast this evening. They already have contingency plans, including possible legal action against the decision by the Parades Commission. Its chairman made a detailed speech setting out the background to its decision. He said there'd been a hostile framework for its work, with the marching orders refusing to meet them and residents' groups castigating them. He also said the Drumcree parade was the landmark, the line in the sand for the whole marching season, and the decision on it much wider than just about a single march.
We cannot see at this stage how a parade could proceed again this year down the Gavaki Road without having a serious adverse impact on community relationships, both locally and more widely across Northern Ireland. We stress that we have not reached this decision lightly, and that it does not imply any erosion of the rights of Orange men in Portadown.
The parade route to Drumcree Church doesn't go through the Catholic area. The return route in the past has. The issue in some ways is about nothing. Men in 18th century regalia and a meaningless stretch of road. And yet it's about everything. To Orange men, the right to celebrate their Protestant culture and heritage in their own country. And to Catholic residents, the right to say no to sectarian triumphalism. In short, it's about which community's winning. The order was founded 200 years ago to defend Protestant rights, rights they now feel are being eroded. They're fiercely British and see themselves as scripturally and religiously based, and they're determined to march.
As an Orange Order, we do not recognise the Parades Commission or the determination, and therefore, in the end of the day, it's up to Portadown District to decide. I would imagine that they will do what they have done in past years, and that is to walk to the church and walk from the church, and I think that is their intentions this year as well.
The Garvahi Road was quiet today, but the depth of feeling about the march not in doubt. The local residents group said the decision was the only logical one, and that the mood in the community was one of relief but apprehension.
We are not gloating in any shape or form. I have already pointed out that it is a matter of regret to this community that the Orange Order has continuously refused and rejected any attempts by the Residents' Coalition to enter into dialogue with them on this whole issue.
The new devolved assembly meets on Wednesday. Lord Alderdice has been appointed as its first speaker. He resigned as leader of the Main Cross Community Alliance party earlier. He's been its leader for nearly 11 years and was elevated to the Lords in 1996, seen as an admission by some that he'd never become an MP. The party performed less well than it had hoped in last week's election. The Assembly's meeting as yet another bitterly divisive marching season looms. A new political setup may be taking its first steps, but the sounds of marching feet and angry voices are growing louder. Dennis Murray, BBC News, Belfast.
President Clinton has arrived in Shanghai on the 5th day of his visit to China. Earlier, he took part in a live television debate at Beijing University, the home of the pro-democracy movement in 1989. He told students that human rights were universal and freedom, strength and stability. They criticised racial problems in the United States.
Beijing University isn't just an Oriental Oxford or Cambridge. It's been the powerhouse for political change in China since it was founded a century ago. And it was where the Tiananmen Square protest of 1989 began. Mr. Clinton had to tread carefully here. He didn't want to lecture the students or the Chinese people about human rights. He wanted to show them by example what open democratic politics are like. But the students in his audience seem to have been selected from reliable members of the university's Communist Party. Their questions were carefully prepared and mostly challenging. Did his friendly smile, the student wanted to know, mask a desire to contain China?
I want a partnership. I'm not hiding another design behind a smile. That's what I really believe. I believe it's not because
Someone else asked about America's human rights problems, and he answered frankly. There was still race discrimination, he said. Finally, someone asked him how he'd like it if students here demonstrated against him, as American students had demonstrated against the Chinese president last year.
actually I have been demonstrated against quite a lot in the United States. I told President Zhang when he was there I was glad they demonstrated against him so I didn't feel so lonely.
The audience, communists and all, lapped it up. The contrast with their own leadership couldn't have been greater. And it was all shown live on Chinese television, though the Americans weren't certain it would be until the broadcast actually started. Outside, where the students hadn't been pre-selected for reliability, they were even more enthusiastic. By now it was lunchtime, and the tail-enders, who had been watching the president, headed for the canteen. Student conditions here have improved since 1989, but not hugely. Will the day come, though, when Chinese students can ask their own presidents tough questions?
Yes, I think so, yes.
But not at the moment.
We have a long way to go, yes.
China is a country that has its own history and culture. It cannot change completely.
Still, there is political change in the air here. It's not very great and it's not very radical, but it's real enough. And because the Clinton visit has been a success, it'll make it easier for the Chinese government to open things up a little more. And above all, it's starting to make people here think. John Simpson, BBC News, Beijing.
Thousands of England World Cup fans have been arriving in San Etienne for the make-or-break second-round match against Argentina, but the organisers have only allocated 2,000 tickets to them. The team travelled today from their training base in Brittany to prepare for the game tomorrow evening.
24 hours before England meet Argentina, inadequate supply meets overwhelming demand. Once again, the search for black market tickets is on. In Saint-Étienne, the two countries' fans are sharing just over 10% of the seats. The rest going to the French public, travel agencies and corporate sponsors, among others. Reselling is illegal but widespread, and the police are turning a blind eye, expressing only polite curiosity as to how much this England fan was prepared to pay.
As little as possible. £150. 150.
But the chances are, say most supporters, anyone securing a ticket will have to pay rather more than that.
The current price being charged is between £400 and £600 for tickets here. And of course that means that the vast majority of England fans inside the stadium will have paid through the nose for the privilege of supporting the club, because a lot of people are making a lot of money out of England supporters.
Glenn Hoddle has said he believes that the bigger the challenge his players face, the better they respond. His squad trained today at the Saint-Étienne Stadium, clearly relaxed on the eve of a crucial game against formidable opponents, with the World Cup now well into its knockout phase. English supporters already in Saint-Étienne today were able to watch the Germany-Mexico game on a giant screen, but it will be switched off 2 hours before tomorrow night's kick-off to prevent large crowds gathering. The town's bars, though, will stay open till 11 at night. The local authorities admit their decision not to impose more extreme alcohol restrictions is based on the behaviour of other foreign fans who've passed through the town during the tournament.
All the people who've been in town so far have behaved quite well, despite the fact they drank a lot, they've had fun all night, but no problem occurred. So why not with British people?
Alongside that hope, the belief the police have learned enough from England's previous games to ensure the event can be successfully managed, whatever the result. Having weighed the evidence from Marseille, Toulouse and Lens, the authorities here have decided on relatively light restrictions on the sale of alcohol. The philosophy that England and Argentina fans might respond if they're trusted to behave. The wisdom of that decision will undergo its severest test in the hours immediately before and after tomorrow night's game. Kevin Connolly, BBC News, Saint-Étienne.
Serbian security forces have mounted a new offensive against ethnic Albanian separatists in the province of Kosovo. The town of Belačevac has been surrounded by Serbian police backed by helicopter gunships. The area, 6 miles north of the provincial capital Pristina, supplies coal for the electricity generators that provide power for much of southern Yugoslavia. A Serbian war crime suspect, Slavko Dokmanovic, has committed suicide in his cell at a detention centre in Holland. Dokmanovic, a former mayor of Vukovar, hanged himself a week before the verdict was due in his trial at the International Criminal Court. He'd been accused of being involved in the massacre of at least 200 men taken from Vukovar Hospital in 1991. Rescue teams in southern Turkey have found another survivor 2 days after the earthquake that claimed more than 100 lives. The woman had been trapped under a collapsed building in the town of Ceyhan since the tremor on Saturday. The emergency services are continuing to look for more survivors. This week, the National Health Service celebrates its 50th anniversary. The service was set up by the post-war Labour government to provide equal and free care for all based upon need. In the first of a series of special reports marking the anniversary, our social affairs editor Neil Dixon looks at how the NHS sometimes struggles to live up to that promise in the face of ever-increasing demands.
Space-age medicine in a modern health service. Advanced drugs like this were unheard of when the NHS was launched 50 years ago. This is Taxol, a new treatment for ovarian cancer. It prolongs life, it gives quality time to women with a terrible disease. But it costs about £8,500 for each patient who receives it, 4 times the existing treatment. The first blow to Joy Wyatt's world came when they told her she had ovarian cancer. The second, when she was told she would not be given Taxol. Her local health authority was not convinced the drug was cost-effective and wouldn't pay for it. It seemed like a death sentence.
I was devastated because I did know about the Taxol, and to think that I didn't have a chance, it didn't seem fair, but I was just devastated.
Joy Wyatt has come to see her consultant at Hammersmith Hospital in London. She is appalled that some of her patients are denied the latest drugs. Taxol has been the first choice treatment elsewhere in Europe for months, but in the NHS, it's all a matter of where you live.
I'm presented with 2 patients on the same day sometimes who are a similar age, similar stage in their disease, and I want to use the drug. I apply to one health authority and I get a fax back reply saying, fine, this is appropriate, use the drug, and the other health authority says no. Now, I can see the inequity in that. I don't tell my patients usually because they have enough stress.
It wasn't supposed to be like this.
On July 5th, the new National Health Service starts, providing hospital and specialist services, medicines, drugs and appliances.
The service created by Labour's Nye Bevan was to provide the best care for everyone, rich or poor, no matter where they lived. At the start, they believed the cost of the NHS would go down as the population became healthier. It was a forlorn hope.
Now, the reason for bringing this to the board today, rather than as part of the annual planning cycle, is because of the high cost involved in this intervention.
It is men and women like this all over the country who decide what the NHS will and will not pay for. This is a public meeting of the Cambridge and Huntingdon Health Authority, although the public has been conspicuous by its absence. They're meeting, among other things, to decide whether women with ovarian cancer in this area should get Taxol. Until now, they've refused to fund the drug.
It seems quite hard to actually say, well, yes, it's available right now, but probably you can have it next year, but I'm sorry, over the next 9 months you're denied the treatment.
Right, a decision. Those in favour, would you show, please?
The vote is carried. Cancer patients in the Cambridge area will receive the drug, although it's not always like this. The authority still does not pay for in vitro fertilisation, varicose veins, and a host of other treatments.
We can't expect everything to be provided, but what I find really difficult to deal with is the pretense that there is a comprehensive health service when a little honesty would actually help the debate go a long way.
Back in London, good news for Joy Wyatt. She's now receiving Taxol, but only after her family complained to the Health Secretary, Frank Dobson.
If I hadn't have had the chance, I might not be here, might I?
We like to believe the health service will be there when we need it, and usually it is. Yet the NHS has been rationing care from the day it began. It's just that the choices now are more stark than ever. Neil Dixon, BBC News.
And tomorrow, in the second of his special reports, Neil Dixon looks at why so many of our district hospitals are facing closure. A woman who helped her mother to commit suicide has walked free from Leeds Crown Court. Gillian Jennison was given a year's probation after pleading guilty to aiding her mother's death by giving her sleeping pills and smothering her with a pillow. The judge, though, said it was clear that she had been a caring and loving daughter. Japan is sliding further into recession, according to the latest report from the country's central bank. Figures out tomorrow are expected to show unemployment reaching another record high. And with economists predicting a fall in output this year, there are now fears that the downturn in Japan could trigger a global recession. Our international business correspondent Peter Morgan reports from the southern Japanese island of Kyushu.
The roller coaster ride of Japan's recession is far from over yet. This theme park in Kyushu is built where a steel mill once stood. But steel production has plummeted to a 30-year low, and in a country once famous for lifetime employment, the workforce in the local industry has fallen by 3/4. Masaru Hirayama, a former steelman, has found work at the park as a maintenance engineer. He feels lucky to have the job because he tells me for the first time in his life, work in Japan is hard to find. Demand for steel from Japan's moribund construction industry has evaporated, as have exports to the crippled economies of Southeast Asia. So the docksides are deserted and more jobs will have to go. Hajima Nakayama, another ex-steelman, is out of work and is learning the hard way how much in Japan has changed.
At the time I left school, we talked about the long-term future of completing our careers in the same factories. Nobody imagined that there would be a time when this system would end.
Some still wave the flag for Prime Minister Hashimoto on the campaign trail ahead of upper house elections. But there is growing frustration in and outside Japan at his government's economic record of doing too little, too late. From Washington, London and Beijing, never before has a modern Japanese Prime Minister faced such international pressure to force through radical economic reform. But it's a challenge which, so far, Mr. Hashimoto has signally failed to meet. Japan's long slide towards slump began with a property crash which has driven many of the country's banks to the verge of collapse. But it's the plunge in the yen's value on the currency markets that's led world leaders to fear a war of competitive devaluation in Asia that could spread recession worldwide. Britain's ambassador to Japan believes every person in Britain has a stake in what happens next.
We don't want to see a recession in this country. We don't want to see the yen continuing to depreciate, making it more difficult for British exporters to get into the market, because that will have an impact on our own manufacturers and on our own competitiveness.
3, 2, 1.
The government plans to relaunch the economy by reforming the banks and massively boosting public spending. At stake is no less than Japan's prosperity, the yen's value, and the future direction of world trade. Peter Morgan, BBC News in Kyushu.
Tennis, and Britain's Tim Henman is through to the quarter-finals of Wimbledon. He beat the number 6 seed, Pat Rafter, by 3-1. But Britain's top women's player, Sam Smith, is out of the tournament. She lost in straight sets to Natalie Tauziat.
For one day at least, British attention was focused firmly on Wimbledon, and Tim Henman, facing the number 6 seed, was going to need all the support that he could get. The centre court crowd wasn't to be disappointed. Henman had saved some of his best tennis for the second week of the championships, breaking Rafter's serve to win the first set. The British number 2 then broke again early in the second set and looked to be in control of the match. But his serve failed him at the crucial moment. 2 double faults let Rafter back, and the set went to a tiebreak. The Australian had been given fresh hope, and he took full advantage, levelling the match with an unplayable return. Henman, though, calmly responded by raising his game to an even higher level, enough to win the third set 6-3. And his place in the third consecutive Wimbledon quarter-final was confirmed in the next set. 6-2 the score. Henman had earned one of the best wins of his career.
I'm delighted to be through to the quarters, but I do feel, you know, very relaxed about the whole situation. And I think I surprised myself a little bit how relaxed I was today.
But British interest in the women's singles has ended. Sam Smith was beaten in the fourth round by the number 16 seed, France's Natalie Tauziat. Smith's consolation for the straight sets defeat will come in the form of the next set of world rankings. She's bound to take a major leap up from her current standing of 94. James Pearce, BBC News, Wimbledon.
Holland are through to the quarter-finals of the World Cup. In tonight's game, they beat Yugoslavia 2-1 in Toulouse, with their second goal coming in the final moments of the match. They now join Germany, who are also through to the last 8, after they came from behind to beat Mexico 2-1 in Montpellier this afternoon.
With some of Europe's footballing elite on show in the Stade Municipal in Toulouse tonight, there was hope that the colour in the stands would be reflected on the pitch. Holland were the more ambitious team in the opening half and deserved their lead. Dennis Bergkamp shrugging off the close attention of Merkovic, his shot somehow finding a way through Ivica Kral. That forced Yugoslavia out of their shell, and the equaliser duly arrived just after half-time, Komljenovic finding himself unmarked. They should have gone ahead 2 minutes later, Jaap Stam conceding a penalty. Mijatovic, though, didn't make the most of the opportunity, unable to match accuracy with power. That was ultimately to prove decisive, the winner arriving in extra time with a rasping shot from Edgar Davids, sending Holland through to the quarter-finals. Earlier in Montpellier, Mexico looked as though they were going through at the expense of Germany. Luis Hernandez evading the German challenges to score his 4th goal of the competition. Germany then showed their renowned fighting qualities, captain Jürgen Klinsmann scoring the equaliser, and with just 5 minutes left, their recovery was complete. Klinsmann providing the perfect cross for Oliver Bierhoff, and Germany were through to the last 8. Bernie Rose, BBC News.
The main news tonight, there were angry scenes at the Stephen Lawrence inquiry as the men suspected of his killing were giving evidence. Police used CS gas as militant black activists forced their way into the hearing. Newsnight is on BBC Two in just a couple of minutes, but from the newsroom tonight, a very good night to you.
Well, the disappointing summer weather continues apace because once again tonight it's wet across the south. We've got some local flooding possible, some heavy rain about, especially across more southern counties of England and up into East Anglia. Just to show you where the wettest of the weather's been over the past few hours, well, it was in South Wales, but it's beginning to clear up now. The heavier rain pushing across the South Midlands up towards Norfolk as well. But around the London area it's pretty wet at the moment, and this rain's going to continue for a few more hours yet. It's not exactly dry further north either. A scattering of showers across the north of England. Still some fairly persistent rain up in the northeastern part of Scotland too. And some of these fairly beefy showers will continue for much of the night, with that wettest weather eventually moving away from East Anglia and Kent round about the end of the night. Temperatures have no problem tonight, no consequence at all. Now, as far as tomorrow's concerned, well, we're going to see the wind switching around to a cool northwesterly, and that cool northwesterly is going to be in for the rest of the week. Now, if you're in the shelter of that breeze, it's not too bad. You'll get some sunshine, and many places in the west especially should stay essentially dry. You can't rule out the odd shower, but essentially dry. But you will find the showers keeping going down the eastern side of Britain for at least the next 24 hours. The high pressure tantalisingly close in the Atlantic, but still too far away. That's how we'll start the day on Tuesday then. Some patchy drizzle down across the southeastern corner, outbreaks of rain across northern Scotland too, filtering into northeast England. But very gradually through the day you'll find that brighter weather moves in from the west. The odd shower still left certainly, and fairly cloudy at times too. Now some of these showers coming down across Scotland and northeast England still fairly sharp, indeed some heavy showers down across the southeastern part as well. Now the top temperature tomorrow probably around the south coast of England, up to 20-21 degrees here. Certainly feeling cool elsewhere, northern and eastern parts of Britain. Very disappointing indeed. Well, still rather showery perhaps down the eastern side of Britain on Wednesday as well. Again, the brighter weather further west, and here mainly dry, but we're looking at temperatures only about 17 to 20 degrees as the maximum down across more southern parts of the country. I think very few showers left by Thursday, but there may well be some more patchy rain coming to the far north of Scotland by that time. Bye-bye.